Things up high, things down low. This is really becoming a problem. It's getting harder and harder for me to get to my favorite intro spot in front of the door. But we'll just have to make do wherever we can find the room. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to put the engine on the chassis. A couple of talking points here. This is where you want to make sure you're not setting any traps for yourself. I made sure to reference the position of the forward ends of the legs of the cherry picker in relation to the positions of my jack stands that are supporting the tractor. I didn't want the legs to come in contact with these before I had the engine drawn all the way up to the bell housing of the torque tubes. And another thing, we used to support these down here on this web. When we took the Super M apart, that's where we had lifted the whole thing, and we had the engine and the front bolster and everything completely bearing upon this unsupported web. And once we opened it up and really finally took a look at it, we decided that was making us a little bit nervous because it is rather thin and it isn't very deep because there's always this opening back here. Not much for gussets to support. So when we put the Super M back together, we supported it back here on the flats where the belly pump would go. And that is a very, very solid area of the torque tube. And it's a lot more solid as well than just having a single point right here. You're kind of double point with jack stands a little further out. We just like that all around better. And finally, something that I'm surprised didn't come up in the comment section at all, and I thought it would. I never attached the input coupling to the input shaft when I threw the input shaft and torque tube on, and I thought somebody would ask why. Well, this is why. I like to be able to push that all the way in as far as it'll go, because then that's one less component that I have to try and line in with the clutch disc and the pilot bearing and everything else while I'm drawing the bolts up and getting the engine flat up to the torque tube. Once the engine is in place, I can just reach under here, slide that forward, engage it with the clutch. All will be well. So that's just a little bit more of a streamlined way I've found of doing it. So let's proceed. Oh man, I thought I was ready to go, but I got to get you off the cameraman pole. One last thing I forgot to mention. I always lock both of the brakes when we're doing this. Just makes the whole chassis that much more rigid. All right, back onto the cameraman pole. Guide bolt time. I use a couple of longer 5/8 bolts for this purpose. It helps quite a bit if you have these as kind of your extra set of hands and eyes, making sure everything stays centered. Here's a quick check I want to do, and we probably won't see it on camera because it's pretty dark up here. I want to make sure. Yeah, we don't have a bind on that input shaft. It feels like I just started into the clutch disc. That makes me feel a lot better. I think this lower dowel, alignment dowel down here needs a little bit of help. I'm not exactly sure why I painted this bolt. I must have forgot that it was inside. All right, I'm taking this opportunity to fit the oil filter. The gasket is stuck in place with some sealer on the block right now because after I put the frame rail on, these bolts are going to be a lot harder to access. So this is the perfect time to get this part done. Left side frame rail, I have the engine block preloaded into it. It's easier to start it up front here first. I need to preload that top bolt, otherwise you can't line it in with the oil filter in place. Bing, 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 Tom Petty. All right, got to turn that off before I get a copyright strike. So we have prepped the pedestal vertical shaft. I wrapped some of my masking tape around that so that we don't scratch any paint when we're going up into the bolster, which is just about at the ceiling right now, but it should be high enough to guide that into the bore at the bottom. So let's go. And these wheels don't want to roll very well with you fighting the camber. If you stand this straight up, then they roll just like a dream, but you gotta go like this. Get it where they need to be. They scrub a little bit too. They leave some black marks on the floor. I have to constantly adjust the position of the handle and the position of the vertical shaft because of the arc that the boom makes as it travels down. So it's a constantly moving goalpost. Now we have to be careful not to damage the seals that are at the bottom of the worm compartment. Just spinning it to make sure nothing binds. We're just about there. And we're home. We didn't scratch the paint either. Bolt started on the left side. And bolt on the right. Okay, everybody, it's a few minutes later, and I've got all of the bolts started, but nothing up here is tight because I like to get the weight on the front wheels, and that's going to get everything in its, I guess, loaded state. And then that's when I like to tighten the bolts down. So we can get the lift out of the way. And I've replaced the jack stands with that simplex jack. Plus, it's not like the tractor can really go anywhere anyway. It can crash down about 1/4 of an inch onto that thrust bearing on the pedestal there. So. There, we are on the front wheels. As you can tell by the light emitting from the torque tube, it is time to finalize that input connection. So we've got our wave plate, and well, we are going to go with all new hardware. The old hardware is right here, and this was all deemed to be good enough the last time around, and it is still serviceable. These bolts can wear some pretty good steps on the shanks there, but you can see the rubber insulators are starting to give up, and the backup washers are not the greatest. So they do sell all new ones. That's what we have right here. All the washers, all the rubber insulators, all the bolts, new lock washers, new nuts. They just work in conjunction with the original wave plate. Let's get it done. Okay, bolt goes through the wave plate. Rubber insulator on each side of it. And we'll start the bolt in the different yokes. Just pick one at a time. Lock washer on the end, followed by the nut. And to rotate around to the final one, I'll release the clutch, rotate it so that we can access it, re-engage again. And we are 3/4 on the bolt head, 11/16 on the nut. So I will tighten these in an alternating manner. Work our way around a couple of times to make sure it all stays rather centered. This one's wanting to spin, so we'll get the backup on there. Once these are all tight, I'll bring you back. There, that's the last one. Release the clutch. Test spin. Good. And here's where all of the effort that is involved in making special tools pays off. All right, everybody, we're under the tractor still. We're just about out of time for today, but a couple more pieces to talk about before we split. This is normally the point where I would put the drive coupling in between the counter shaft of the transmission here and the input lug of the hydraulic pump. But because I'm pretty much done with the hydraulics on this tractor, at least for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to throw that coupling in. This is an old timer's trick, because if they knew they weren't going to be using this belly pump for an extended period of time, they would just take that coupling out. That way you're not just idly spinning this pump for no reason, putting all that wear on it. I will fill it with fluid to make sure that it doesn't, stay dry. But beyond that, for now, we can just seal this compartment right off. And this is the cover that closes off that drive coupling area behind the belly pump, and you'll notice there are a couple of reinforced felt seals on it. I remade these from an intact original goods set that I found on one of these old covers, and they just are like a friction fit beneath all those little tabs. So what I did was just drew out a sketch with the rough dimensions of both of those pieces. They're about 1/8 of an inch thick. You can make them out of whatever you want. Like I said, this is kind of a woven center felt lined surface on both sides. It's a little bit strong. It holds up well to that, but anything that would stand in, you could make them out of. So there's your dimensions for overall width, the notches, the contours, everything. You can pause this right here if you want to study that a bit. Otherwise, let's get this put on. And it only goes on one way because it has to fit tightly around the rear cover plate, control plate on the pump. And you do have to compress those seals just a bit to get it up in there. There we go. And right, correct, and proper dot top bolts going in, because I did not have dot tops holding this on the last time. So even though it's down on the bottom and you can't see it, we'll know that it's right. So the final piece of the day is the cover under the clutch compartment. You have to take this off if you want to shoot grease up into the release bearing, or just have a good look at the clutch. So once again, dot top bolts going in. There we are, because we did not have dot tops before. Again, I was really slouching in this department of the lower body shields last time. I just had whatever bolts would fit. So we've made all of that right now. Much better. Okay, when did this tractor get so long? I don't remember it being this long. It's like it stretched way out. It must have been all that paint I put in between everything. It just, yeah, okay. All kidding aside, this was not a bad day's worth of work. And look at all of the floor space we've got back. No more jacks and things sitting around and cardboard, and it's really nice. That went together very fast. And we're not out of parts yet. We've got a few more we could still put on. We're just out of time for today. And the best part of it is, look at this. I can freely walk back to my favorite intro and outro spot. What can I say? I just like the lighting back here. Thank you for watching, everyone. Encouraging day. It makes me feel like we were a little further along than it appeared to be all this time waiting on that engine. So I'll bring you all back next time. We've got a few more pieces left to throw on, and still have the governor to go through in the ignition distributor drive, and then delve into a few new pieces after that. Hope to see you all back again.